Header Gallery is part of the New Media Caucus and is dedicated to promoting the creative output of our members by situating their work in thoughtfully curated exhibitions that take place across our entire web presence. New Media Caucus is an international nonprofit association formed to promote the development and understanding of new media art. We represent and serve artists, designers, practitioners, historians, theorists, educators, students, and scholars. Recognizing new media art to be inherently interdisciplinary, multimodal, and evolving, we support and advance a wide range of inquiry to catalyze further evolution of the field. The New Media Caucus is committed to extending and sustaining the diversity of our community, board, and membership. To promote an environment of equality, inclusion, and respect for difference, we prioritize inclusion as an ongoing collaborative process of growth that we continually address both within the caucus and in our field.
Welcome, everyone, to the 25th episode of Header Presents. I'm your host, Renee.
And I'm your co-host, Constanza.
For this episode, we will talk about Solarpunk and its relationship to new media art. We were inspired by an open call by Extrapolation, a UK-based journal that Constanza found and wanted to do something with. But what about we move to it and you tell us about it?
The paper? Yeah. So I came across the call for papers for Extrapolation. The title of it is Science Fictional Ecologies in Contemporary Art. Now, usually this journal focuses a lot on science fiction in terms of pop culture, film, media, etc. But this is one of the first times that I have personally seen that they're doing a call specifically for contemporary art. And so they talk about it in a very interesting way. So I'm just going to read just a little bit the introduction of what they're looking for, right? They say, in a moment defined by planetary transformations and crises, speculative and science fictional narratives have become crucial modes for imagining possible and alternative futures and realities. So that was really, that's really something that got me thinking about not only the work that I've been doing, but also the presentation we had at CAA last year. Actually, that comes to mind. And they're looking for various topics, including, Afrofuturisms, including rewilding the museum, and among other things. But the thing that inspired this podcast today was also thinking about Solarpunk. So I want us to see if Renee can tell us a little bit more about Solarpunk.
Okay, so Solarpunk is an interesting thing. It's fairly new, we'll get to that. But it's a movement that it's a little bit less pessimistic than most punk branded is not the name, categorized things. But before that, let's talk a lot about punk itself. So punk, this is the Dead Kennedys, one of my favorite bands. If you haven't heard of it, it's a really, really good band. Holiday in Cambodia is one of my favorite songs. But yeah, so the point is, punk is a movement that starts in the 70s and 80s, and it starts almost in parallel in the US and in the UK. And it's an anarchist movement, and that's very important to keep in mind. One of the things that it has is that it's completely anti-authority. It's self-regulate. The belief is that you should be self-regulated. You try to be because you want to be. It also has this really interesting thing that it's anti-liberal, and liberal in the the economic sense of the world. They try to be inclusive, they try to be tolerant to people, but not every people, and that's one of the things that distinguishes punk from other movements. That's where the phrase "eat the rich" comes from. They have this strong Marxist bend, right? One of the problems, though, is that it's also been sort of corrupted by the right. So you also have right-wing punks, which are just basically, and it even they have to develop codes. So certain ways of tying your boots indicate your political leanings. And that's one of the criticisms I may have about punk, is that they pretend that there's no right-wing punks when there pretty much are, and you have to be very careful. The fact that you need a shoelace code to distinguish people tells you that they do exist. It shouldn't, but whatever. It's kind of like the people, like Elon Musk loving Rage Against the Machine, for example.
Yeah.
It's like, my brother, the machine is not the copier machine.
Yeah.
Um, right? But anyhow, let's not get tied up in this. This is a movement that started like in the 70s, the 80s, and from there it had various offshoots. One of the most famous ones is actually goth, which is making a resurgence right now. But there's also conflict there because there's aesthetic goth, and then there's goth, which is more again punk, anti uh, authority, etc. And then there's people who just like the look. But yeah, so but right from there, like many other movements started happening in punk. So, for example, this is a drawing, an illustration by Marcin Jakubowski. Jakubowski, I can't pronounce it. I'm so sorry. Um, and this is what we call steampunk. It's a very popular version where everything is powered by steam, and you see a lot of it. You have like it's surprisingly hard to find images about the steampunk now because
Mm.
of AI.
Oh
Like
God.
if you put like you search for steampunk art, everything looks the same. Everything is this mush, like it's horrible, and it's all AI. It's all AI generated because steampunk is one of the most famous and more popular things you find on those creator like Behance or
Yeah.
back in the day. The other one, what was it called? DeviantArt.
In art. Yeah.
So obviously these things started feeding from those databases, and then they just produced this homogenizing. But this is an actual artist, so that's steampunk. So we also have biopunk. This is Vesper, a movie, and the thing that characterizes biopunk is this use of genetic engineering, right? It
Hmm.
tries to do things very like, altering your genes, and we see this in, like, for example, in this movie Vesper. But it's also found in things like Bioshock, which is
Yeah.
a video game, right? And it's not as popular, but it has its fans. Then
Yeah.
we have this thing. This is a subdivision of steampunk, but it's called diesel punk, and like I guess you can figure out why, right?
Hmm.
This is by Jacob Rosalski. He does illustrations. He created this world called Scythe, and it's done. What he says he likes is creating these images of normal people coexisting with these things. And in particular about Scythe, it's that it's an alternate version of the world at the time of World War One.
Right.
So Nikola Tesla's alive, and then you have these fictional nations. So you still have like something like Germany. You have something like like Poland, because he's Polish. But you also have this nation called Crimea, for example,
Yeah.
and you have the Kingdom of Albion, and instead of being British, it's Scottish dominated, and things like that. And then you have these Japanese explorers who are actually moving. It's a really interesting world. Anyhow, I could talk about Scythe forever. It's my favorite board game. Uh, and then we have the big one, the one that everybody knows now, Cyberpunk. I didn't want to use the video game because I played that whole thing, and honestly, I did not enjoy it. I just hate played it. I don't know if you ever heard of that term.
Hmm.
Uh, like hate reading or hate watching. Just do it because you want to get through with it. Anyways, Akira by Katsuhiro Otomo is one of the most popular, most famous representations. Even though it's not the first, there's this comic in Britain called Judge Dredd, which has had a couple of movies, which is considered
Hmm.
the first cyberpunk work, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, but you also have like things like Blade Runner, for example. And
Mhm.
one of the things that all these punks have is that they're very pessimistic.
Yeah.
Like maybe not like Jacob Rosalski's version of it, but like all of them tend to be like capitalism, super like big division between the rich and the poor. I have no idea where they get those ideas. Uh, anyhow, yeah, you got it. Yeah, so there's this whole idea, for example, in cyberpunk, there's like corporations control everything, and the only thing you can control is your body, and that's why you modify yourself. But the problem with that, for example, in the video game, is that you modify yourself so much that you go into what is called cyber psychosis.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, you go crazy. There's a lot of stuff in that. In Akira, for example, there's the government experimenting with these kids, and then you have this one that just becomes like this blob of a monster because just can't handle the living in this world, right? But Solarpunk is different. Solarpunk represents solar energy as a renewable energy source and an optimistic vision of the future that rejects primal doomerism, while the punk refers to do it yourself and the countercultural, post-capitalist, and sometimes decolonial aspects of creating a future, such a future. In some circles, it's been argued that Afrofuturism, certain versions of Afrofuturism, fit within the definition of solar punk. For example, uh, Wakanda from the Avengers. That would be an example of a solar punk country where they exist in a more like, well, they do have technology, but it's not
It's
completely
sustainable.
sustainable. Exactly. Thank you. It's also not predatory, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of my favorite games. It's called The Wandering Village. It's really cheap if you want to play it. It's really cheap. And you have this creature called Omo, and you live like you are one of. You see those little huts on top of it. You are the leader of the village, and you can make choices into how you develop your village, and you can be sustainable and create a symbiosis with the creature, or you can be a parasite and feed off of its blood, and then you have to like manage how much you extract. But still, the solar punk aspect is on the more optimistic side. The other one is like showing you like the negative aspect of it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a fairly new thing. Like I said, it was created and well, first used as a term in Republic of the Beast, which is a blog, and it was called From Steampunk to Solarpunk. It was published in April 30, 2008, and it started because of this little thing. This is a boat called the Beluga,
Hmm.
um, and it's a boat that uses sails instead of an engine to move. There's a computer that controls and optimizes how the sail is like tilted and everything. So it's always has the most ideal use of the natural resource that is the wind. And we also had like a few more after this project. Like there was like in the news like a few months ago, like ships that are now like shipping containers, like those gigantic ships that used to use like so much diesel and stuff. And now they're using sails, and it turns out as far as I remember, it's been very productive. Like they're really good, and they're cheaper to run. So living in capitalism, when you tell someone that it's better, faster, and cheaper, it tends to get adopted. So it might be one of the few times, right?
Hmm.
Another example, Nausicaa by Studio Ghibli. This is one of the least known movies of the studio. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Not this one, but I do like Studio Ghibli movies. Just haven't heard about this one in particular, which is very weird.
Yeah, it's one from the 80s. It's very, very old school. But it's
Hmm.
like you can see how she lives, right? Like she's surrounded by plants, but there's still technology. She flies in this thing. Um, it's a very like interesting world, and it inspired a lot of things, including Scavengers. I don't know if you watched that. Scavengers is the series on HBO, and
Okay.
it's these people who are on the ship, and they crash into a planet, and the planet is absolutely and completely alien. And I think it's one of the best examples of alien life in fiction. Like it's totally unrecognizable, but you still get like, oh, that's this. But they exist in these very complex chains of relationships that I think become very visible because they're so unfamiliar. Like when you look at them, you can say, "Oh, this causes this, and this," which I think in our world, because we ignore it because we are so familiar with it, like we don't see it. So it's a really interesting piece. Then we have Horizon Zero Dawn, another video game. Uh, but before we go on with the values and all that, I wanted to hear what you think about this.
Yeah, I think one of the more important aspects of solar punk in particular is thinking through the sustainable the sustainable qualities of living symbiotically or living with plants and nature, right, in a way that is not destructive. There's a really good book by Nick Coldry and Ulises Ali Mejias, and they wrote together this book called The Cost of Connection. And in The Cost of Connection, they talk about how, among other things, about how capitalism is, you know, alienating us. This is something that we know prior to other people talking about this. But I think the contribution that is most significant about them is thinking through how it is actually colonizing our daily lives, but also thinking through the materials that are used in our technologies, how they are mined, how they are manufactured, and we have become very alienated from our technological tools. And one of the most important things, like I can go on this a little bit more, but one of the
Okay.
more important, huh? Pardon?
Do.
Yes.
Do go on.
No, I was just thinking about how one of the more important things is thinking how capitalism has indeed colonized not just technology itself, but also is now doing it to us in terms of datafication, right?
Hmm.
And so, and this all starts with how capitalism is a new colonizing force, and it does it not just with us, but also with nature. And so, thinking through all of these different aspects of Solarpunk is how can we possibly think about a way out of this? And that is something that I ask my students. It's a difficult question. I ask this to a lot of other people too, and especially scholars. And I said, is there an out to this system that we live in? And this is how you get all of these different imaginaries, right? Like
Yeah.
solar punk, you get it through Afrofuturism, because in essence, what they are, there are visions of alternative futures, right?
Yeah.
Post-apocalyptic, either dystopian or utopian as well, right? And they each have their good and bad, or maybe not good and bad, but they each have their pluses, but also things that they are not considering, for example, right? So that's just what I'm thinking about this so far in terms of video
Yeah.
games.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely, and I think you hit the nail on the head with this comment of what they're not seeing or what will it take to move to these systems. And I think this is my personal answer. Is nobody's gonna like my answer, and it is that it can be done, but it's gonna be super painful, and I don't think even like most Western like left leaning people are willing to pay the price that this would require.
Right. I
Because
think
when you talk about the global south, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
Just real quick, like when you think about like the global south, when you think about Mexico, when you think about uh, like impoverished regions in Brazil, impoverished regions in I don't know, in Senegal, in Congo, and all these places,
Yeah.
a lot of the people are already living in similar systems. For example, in Mexico, we have the milpa, which is a very old native system of farming. And I think you saw an exhibition about that in New York. You were telling me about.
Fernando Palma's exhibition on
Yeah,
it at Now Projects. And we talked about this in a different podcast episode too.
yeah, we did. Right, I
Yes.
just remembered that we did. But yeah, like for example, that thing when we're thinking about that, that's an attempt at solar punk, and there's a lot of this in new media, right? But yeah, one of the things is we don't realize the cost that it's, or in my opinion, what it's gonna cost to
No,
do
but
it.
you're absolutely true. Like my other concern, and it's a concern that's raised by many people, is the incentives are not in place in order to necessarily achieve a solar punk future, for example.
Hmm.
Which is interesting because I agree with that to an extent, but also it makes me think about how various thinking about futures and alternative futures and things like that, utopian or otherwise, some of them have gone back to more traditional, and going back to Fernando Palma, more traditional ways of agriculture, more traditional ways of understanding the earth, indigenous, you might even, say in some cases, right?
Hmm.
Because there's a return to, not to sound, um, there's a word for this, but there's a certain sense in which people want to return to the origin of how we
Oh,
started.
romantic.
Yes, exactly. In some ways, I understand how they're going back to the origins of agriculture and how we process and how we interact with nature and the world. But also, there's a sense in which it is romanticized, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and it just makes me think of also the steampunk aesthetic that you also put up in one of the slides. But it also made me realize, yeah, if you could go back to it, it was excellent because art history plug here. In the Impressionist period, what happened is that a lot of artists were very frustrated with the industrialization that was happening, right, with manufacturing,
Yeah.
labor law, etc. And so a lot of artists took it upon themselves to create works that reflected this condition or this new reality, right? And one of the first works of art by Monet, I know this is such a tangent, but it makes
No,
sense,
I
I
know
promise.
exactly where you're going.
But the first work and where the Impressionist period name actually comes from is called Impression Sunrise. And if you look closely, we can put the image up in a second or something. But
Yeah.
in Impression Sunrise, it's a beautiful, like,
Let me
uh,
Google.
pardon? Yeah, please. In Impression Sunrise, there's this beautiful scene of a sunset in a little lake or something. And in the back is something I often ask my students and just people looking at it. In the back side, in the background, you see industrialization. And
Hmm.
you see cranes, you see the manufacturer factories and the smokestacks, for instance. And
What?
you see it very faintly though, but it's there. And
There.
it just reminds me of how art is constantly reflecting on the conditions in which we are living in. And um, this is exactly that one. Excellent. And that one is just it's an example of how we're also rethinking and trying to consider alternatives to our current system because I think we are in a greater extent not just anxious about it, but also just tired of the system, you know,
Yes.
and not a lot of people know what to do about it. And so I think this is where there has been a call for things like Afrofuturism, for Indigenous futurism, etc. Yes, William Morris, excellent. Um, but yeah, I think this is where these things are coming from for sure. And art has always been a way in which to re-envision things, right?
Yeah. No, and like example, like the DIY, like you could argue that William Morris had like his punk street, right? Like
Exactly.
he was talking about these designs, he made them freely available because the idea was that you would be able to get your piece of paper, draw the thing, color it in, and make your own wallpaper. You would learn how to make your own furniture. It was very romantic, but it has a risk. I think it bears mentioning because you can end up in some really weird spaces when we talk about going back, and we're seeing it, for example, in Tradwives. You can see it on Cottagecore. You
Cottage
can see
core,
it in
yeah.
all these things that eventually, or even things like, which I always found really amusing, is how the whole new age thing moved from the left to the right.
Hmm.
Because it used to be that the people who were into crystal healing and the veganism and all these things were people on the left, and now it's people on the right, and it's becoming a pipe to the alt right. But anyhow, one of the things that Solarpunk has is this idea that we're not going to let those things drag us down. The problem is, how do we push forward from that, right? So
Exactly.
before we continue, let's talk about its values a little bit. So first of
Hmm.
all, it's renewable energy. One of the big deals with Solarpunk is having renewable energy. That's why it's called solar, because of solar panels. But the contradiction is right there because, like you were mentioning, there's a lot of romanticism behind it, and people don't realize that solar panels are really expensive and consume a lot of resources that need to be strip mined, and that they are very polluting, and they have to be replaced very frequently. And that's one of the problems that solar energy has.
And you need land. You need land in order to create these panels as well.
And you need
You need
land,
space.
exactly.
Yeah,
And guess where that land is gonna be found? Because it's the places with sun,
exactly.
the global south.
Yeah.
You also have this idea of refusing pessimism, which we're not succeeding at right now. But the point is, like, they're looking for something new, right? They're looking for a way out, and that has to be recognized, right?
Of course.
Then they're yeah, and then they're talking about sustainable technologies. Again, solar panels may not be the most sustainable. Ironically, nowadays, with the advances in nuclear power, it's greener than solar panels, especially with thorium salt reactors.
Hmm.
The amount of waste that nuclear generates is so small, and it can be recycled, that it's become more sustainable. The problem is that we had this rhetoric from Chernobyl and from Nine Mile Island in New Jersey when the nuclear reactor melted, that it scared the whole world. Whether you were in the east or the west side of the wall, these two things happened. They were done by improper handling. It wasn't even like the technology that was failing. It was just people doing stupid things because they weren't paying attention, or people saving money, which is what happened in Chernobyl. Um, it's this very complex thing, right? Like, and this is something I actually teach my students when they talk about sustainability. I had a student who was designing a signage system for a botanical garden in Mexico. And they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna make it in wood, and we're gonna do it with like wood burning. What's it called? Um, Pyrography.
Oh,
So
okay,
you
okay.
burn the thing." And I'm like, "Sure. Have you considered in Mexico it rains like 6 months of the year in
Hmm.
the region where we are? What does that have to do with anything? Well, if it's wood, you have to treat it for water damage, and if you do it, that's polluting. In this case, sustainability would require metal with enamel
Enamel,
with
yeah.
enamel, and with enamel, so it would resist decay, and then you would have to do this thing once, not every 6 months having to make a new sign, which would
Yeah.
require more wood, which would require more everything. In the end, and also you have to consider the finances of it because you live in capitalism. So, how many times can the botanical garden afford to change those signs before it becomes too prohibitive, right? So,
So sustainable,
sustainable doesn't always mean green. Sorry.
exactly. It's also context specific to the area in which, like
Mm-hmm.
geographical position that you're in, for sure. Absolutely.
You see a lot of that here in Germany. Like, people keep talking about sustainability and being like responsible with resources, but then you see them eating bananas. And
Okay.
it's like, you do realize that bananas have to be shipped from the south,
Uh-huh.
from another country. If you're talking about sustainable, you should be only eating like the things that are grown in your region.
Hmm.
So the point is, like, we talk about sustainable. Oh, these bananas are sustainable. Coffee. The entire EU would not be able to have coffee if they were actually serious about sustainability. Not only
Yeah.
because of how far it is, but because of the unfortunate situations behind its making,
So
its
does this
harvesting, and
mean that
everything.
things are just not realistic? Because how are you going to tell people, hey, you got to stop eating bananas or coffee or chocolate, everything from what people consider the new world or, this
Yeah,
global south, right?
no, that's a really interesting question, and that's the point. You have to make sacrifices. I told you, like, left-leaning people in Western countries were not gonna like the sacrifices because you're
Hmm.
not gonna get your quinoa, you're not gonna get your chia seed, because chia was a Mexican crop that was specifically grown by a group in northern Mexico, and now they can't afford it, and now we have nutrition and like malnutrition issues in that region.
Yeah.
because chia became popular in the West. So, and that would actually shift the power balance because a lot of the resources that the world really enjoys come from the global south. If you
Exactly.
think about all the things that Europe would not have that they considered theirs, for example, Belgian chocolate is Mexican, tomatoes, Italy, Mexican, potatoes, which is the basis diet of Germans and Irish, gone. Like there's so many things that are extracted from the south and they're seen as normal here. And you would have to think, can I? Well, potatoes do grow here because it's like from the Andes, but it's an invasive crop. It's not natural to Europe, so you would have to eat turnips.
Yeah.
Well, the global south is eating bananas and mangoes and all that stuff. Um, and I don't think a lot of people are willing to do that sacrifice. And the other
Ex-
thing is a lot of performativity.
no, you're absolutely right. I think that we are living with the after effect, or not even the after effect, the effects of colonization and about trade and sometimes forced trade, especially, right? About the goods and services that come from the global south to everywhere else in the world.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and this is where you get problems with sustainability, of course.
But even us as new media academics, we are being hypocrites
Hmm.
because our computers require coltan. Coltan is not found in the US or in Europe. It's from China, it's from Colombia, it's from Mexico. I mean,
Yeah.
China's its own self colonizing power, but it used not to be. But in the case of Mexico or Colombia, we have things like state sponsored terrorism by Elon Musk to secure the Bolivian mines or Colombian mines. No, it was Bolivian mines. The Bolivian mines, so he could have the batteries for his eco friendly cars, the Teslas. So the entire system is not sustainable. And that's what I mean. Like, it has it will be painful because the only way is you have to break commerce, and I don't think anyone is willing to lose TikTok and YouTube and Spotify and just live locally, because that's the thing, like how many people.
No, what I was going to say, we live with conveniences, and this
Hmm.
is something that, for example, the first class I teach, and for my new understanding new media course at Hunter, is where do you think your computer parts and mobile devices come from? And when I tell them the difficult truth, the manufacturing in China with the difficult labor laws, the minerals that come from the Congo and other places in Africa, they just, no one, and it's not just them, no one thinks about these things and about and it's all because of the system that we live in, you know,
Exactly.
it's a commodity.
Exactly, as long as we have commodities in the same context. And the thing is, if that were to happen, our job would not exist.
Exactly.
You would not be able, because you would not have the okay, how do you create a sustainable internet? How do you create a sustainable server farm that doesn't, pollute the earth using non-renewable resources? Like, this is, it has to be systemic and it has to be from the bottom up, and I don't think people are willing to do that, and something really bad would have to happen. And we saw this, the reason that we moved into capitalism was because of the Black Plague.
Hmm.
Like, three-quarters of Europe disappeared
Yeah.
because of the Black Plague, and that's the only thing that allowed the underclass to break away and separate themselves from the feudal lords.
Hmm.
So, what would have to happen for everyone to be able to disengage from Elon Musk, from Jeff Bezos, all these people, right? And we have a stake in this continuing with, I mean, our careers. We travel, we do all these things, and that's the thing. There's this very famous phrase that there's no ethical consumption within capitalism,
Yeah. I
but
love
that's
that.
not supposed to be an excuse.
No, exactly. But I guess my question, like, from all of this that we've been talking about, we seem pretty pessimistic, don't you think?
Yes.
Um, and my question, I guess, thinking about right now how people are envisioning these futures, alternatives, and coming up with Solarpunk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, can we blame them though?
No, of course not. They're looking for a way out, and
Is
they
it,
still have
yeah,
hope.
exactly. No,
um,
exactly. What happens to hope and what happens to, is this like part of the human condition to always think about an alternative to the crisis that we're living in today?
I think, and this is what I think is my part, and I do the same thing when I teach art. It's we need the people who live in the clouds, right? The people who dream, who have all this hope and all these ideas, but you also need the person that's like, it's not gonna work, because in the middle is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that happens is like you've heard the phrase like the world is the no the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
So you need someone to be grounded and say no, think about what you're creating, because yeah, there's people who dream and think of like, oh, we're going to be eco-friendly, we're going to do this, and they create the electrical car, and it's like, have you thought about the fact that it would be better if we had mass transit?
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Like what happens to
the
mass
electrical
transit?
car is not a solution, it's a patch, it's just keeping the car companies going.
Yeah.
uh, we
No,
do not
absolutely.
need more cars, we do not need green cars. What we need is massive public transit that's reliable, that's healthy, that's safe, that moves, because in the space of 4 Teslas, it's the same length as a truck, a bus, a city bus.
Hmm.
In a bus, you can fit what, like 50 people, 60 people? In
Yeah.
3 cars, you can fit at most 15. And that's if every car is packed. And you know that's not true. Like most cars have 1 or 2 people in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we don't need cars. What we need is reliable, proper public transit. And people will tell you, but I need my car. Yes, you do. Maybe you actually do. Maybe you are disabled and you need the flexibility of a car. But that means that for you, the roads will be emptier. You will be going to those places you need faster. But for everyone else that doesn't need a car, just to go and park it for 8 hours in an office, it's going to be better. So we do need both things. We need people, because look what happened with NFTs and crypto. Crypto was born of this idea of giving, like banking the unbanked, right? Of giving back to creators, and they refused to listen to the people who were saying no. And
Hmm.
now what do we have? FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, um, PewDiePie, Logan Paul, all these scammers selling like NFTs and then running with the money, right?
Yeah.
You have NFTs that don't give back to the creators. People minting NFTs of works they don't own, and that's because the hopeful people did not listen to the pessimists. So we need both. I think that's my job. I'm
Yeah.
really good at coming up with the bad part of it, but not because I want to exploit it, but because I want to stop it.
Right.
But well, we're missing one of the things, and the other one is do-it-yourself ethos, which is very punk. Um, Pro tip: if you're buying your stuff from Hot Topic, you're not punk.
Oh,
You have to go to a charity shop and buy things from there, and then you fix them and you make them how you want. If you go and buy a Ramones T-shirt, you're not punk.
hmm,
Of like famous punk musicians, right? Like they're selling you T-shirts, they're selling you the sentence to things. Um, but at the same time, it's like the whole point of punk was you do it yourself. You don't need someone to tell you. But I want to see you use wear a homemade Ramones T-shirt and not get stopped by security in the concert and being told that you're like breaking some form of copyright,
yeah.
right? So it's complicated. But I also wanted to mention like works, like things that already exist in literature. So, for example, for things that were before, like predecessors to Solarpunk, we can have like Ursula Le Guin with The Dispossessed and Always Coming Home. Then we have Ernest Callenbach with Ecotopia, Kim Stanley Robinson with Pacific Edge, and Starhawk, which is the fifth sacred thing. And you can see like this is going back to actual punk to 1974.
Yeah.
right? But in more like contemporary things, so we have solar. Most of these are anthologies. So it's Solarpunk, logical and fantastic stories in a sustainable world. Wings of Renewal, a Solarpunk Dragons anthology. That sounds super fun. Sunvolt, stories of solarpunk and eco speculation. Glass and Gardens. And then this one is an author called Becky Chambers, and she has two books: A Psalm for the Wild Built and A Prayer for the Crown Shy. Then in film, for predecessors, we have Treasure Planet. I don't know if you ever watched that movie. It's
No, I haven't.
it's basically it's that book Robinson. No, what was it? Treasure Island uh, story, but it's turned into this solar punk thing where like they live in space, but they use sails and things. And Wally, which is or Wally, I don't know, the little guy trying to fix the planet and finds the plant and all that, right? And Strange World, which I have not watched. And then actual solar punk things, Avatar, not the best movie. It's basically Dances with Wolves
Yeah.
with blue people. And Beasts of the Southern Wild, I recommend that better. And then we have real life examples because this is actually being done. It's not something that's just remained in fiction, right? So, for example, the Singapore Botanic Gardens have these places with green roofs and all that.
Oh yeah, it's a huge in architecture, especially sustainable architecture is one of those things that has become super big for solar punk
Exactly.
aesthetic. Yeah, and
So,
thinking too.
Bosco Verticale, for example. But and we've talked about this, the risks, and one of the promises that it lends itself to greenwashing. If I could tell you how many green walls are actually made with artificial plants, or plants that will not survive in a wall, I would be a billionaire by now.
Yeah.
Like it's used in this very vacuous way, right? Like saying, "Oh," and you see this in everything. Like even arts organizations, like for every ticket you buy, a tree will be planted. Okay, sure. Where is it going to be a monoculture, like a monoculture? Is it just going to be one type of tree, or are you actually going to try and build an ecosystem where things can live? All these efforts that you constantly see of like planting trees, but then it's like no follow up. But it also leads to gentrification because who can afford this? Certainly not me,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
No, yeah. Yeah, you're
You
absolutely
know,
right.
there was this idea of this bridge in London that was going to have a forest on top of it. Also, like that would have raised the value of the land around it, and that would have resulted in more gentrification. People not being already unable to pay rent in London would be completely driven out of the city, right? Like you have all these things. So we have to be careful with how we approach. But we've seen things. Remember that exhibition in Connecticut College that I did? We had a lot of solar punk ideas
Hammerman, yeah.
there. The
Hammerman.
Ammerman, yeah. So
Concept.
let me pull it up. Okay, here we go. Let me share again. How do I change the share? Okay, I see. Here it is. So this one had a lot of that. It was very interested seeing how many of these works were about the ecology in some way or another. So, for example, we had where is this stream of data? No, S to us. I think it's one of them by Hoffman. Yeah. So Hoffman was doing this work, which is a video art. Like it's kind of complicated to see, but it's about ecosystems as a metaphor for synthesis. Um, it was a really interesting work in terms of how it worked with ecology and what was happening in terms of the biosystems, especially during the pandemic, right? Then we also had where is this Made Ground, which was a study of these islands that happened in. They were
Mm.
dredging channels for things for like making entry into like for boats, and the residue would turn and became islands, and those islands started to become biomes. But the funny thing they have is that the middle is completely abandoned, like dead, and the surrounding you can see it, like it has plants everywhere. This is not man-made. Well, it's semi-man-made, but the devastation or the emptiness of it on the surrounding areas is completely natural,
Mm-hmm.
which is really funny, and that's what they were studying. Then we also had where is this one? Hold on. Fungal Chapel by Gabriel Sabaville, which was this thing using fungus. This is the most Solarpunk one because it used fungus and the signals from like nature and interfering with electronics to create these sound spaces and like spiritual things.
Yeah.
Very, very Nausicaa, by the way. So that was one of the interesting ones in terms of the bio thing. But there's another one, Seed Cabinet, for example. This one is by Katri Gladys, and it was about teaching people about the seeds, their histories, and how they connect to the environment. You were supposed to pull these, and they would show you these seeds and then the pollinators, and then you had like a little video about them. It was a really interesting work, and it also has to do with this catalog. It's a card catalog from like a library, so there's
Yeah.
a lot of to talk about it in terms of the history behind libraries and museums and the categorization of seeds and how those seeds got to be where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so those were the most interesting ones. Water Stories also, that was by Andrea Wollensack. Um, this was about like stories of people in, I believe, the Alaska. Yeah. So it's about native people, but also people in like that live in Alaska but are not native. The stories and how they deal with the ecology around them and all these things. It was an interesting work.
I think that in the examples that you've shown, one thing that comes to mind is because the difficult that we have is the alienation that we experience from the tools that are made and how they're made, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I think a really good way to think about going towards the future, because I'm hopeful, I really am, is becoming much more acquainted with nature and ecology and how we can do that starting from the smaller generation, right? Or the younger generation, I should say. So things
Yeah,
works like really prompt us to think about our relationship with the world, but also with nature as well, and how we can move on, in much more empathetic way, I think, as well.
yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things is you have to start with really young children, and we had that to a point in the 90s, for example. We had all these things like Captain Planet and all these shows, and it kind of died off after a while. But the
Yeah.
thing is, success in like ecology has a very big problem of becoming invisible.
Hmm.
You don't see the successes, only the failures. So, for example, remember the hole in the ozone layer.
Yeah.
Like nobody talks about it, but that's because we fixed it.
Hmm.
Like we literally fixed it. We realized there was these things that we were putting on the aerosol cans and on refrigerators and all these other things, CFCs they were called, and we stopped using them because everybody started like, hey, this is really bad. This is really bad. There's causing cancer. Blah blah blah. Well, not blah blah blah, but you know what I mean. A lot of discussion on it, and we actually managed to get corporations and companies to stop using them, and because of that, it's closed. But now people are using that example as an example of something that, like, oh, we shouldn't worry. Look at the hole; it fixed itself. It is not. No, it didn't fix itself. We fixed it, right?
Yeah. So there's hope, right?
There is
There's hope.
hope. You just have to be able to reframe it for people because now we have this discussion of going to Mars. If you can terraform Mars, you can fix it. Earth has an atmosphere, Mars doesn't. Earth has a magnetosphere, Mars doesn't. Earth has water, Mars doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, all the things that you would need to fix Mars, you could do on Earth to fix Earth.
No, I know, and it's just another form of colonizing for my,
Oh, of course.
and so it's one of those things where I ask myself, why can't we do that on Earth? Have we completely abandoned it? Have we
Sexy.
completely thought? Pardon?
Is because it's not sexy.
It's not. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But also, I think that in many ways we have abandoned it, and the first course of action is always like, well, what else can we do? What is our escape plan?
Yeah,
What
exactly.
else can we go and colonize? And it's really disappointing.
Yeah. There's this show, Sex, Death, and Robots. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes, I've heard of it. Yeah. I've seen
So,
some of.
yeah, there's this one that's about, well, that's actually been on two of the series, which is the three little robots doing tourism of Earth.
Mhm.
And they're talking about how humans were eradicated by AIs that didn't want to be treated like servants. But one of the funny things is in the second episode is that they're talking about how, like, oh, these people believe that if they had not enough shotgun shells, they would survive the apocalypse, but they started turning against themselves almost immediately because they hunted all the deer. And then they go, and then these other people, they created these cities in the ocean, but the AI stopped working and they died. And then they go, and these other people, oh, these other people went to space, and it's like, what? But what? I thought the rich ones created the islands. It's like, no, no, that's the rich. These are the super rich, and they also
Oh.
didn't make it. And it's like all them. And one of Rome is going like all the money that they spent in trying to get to Mars, they could have just fixed their planet. It's like, yeah, but they're stupid, and that's how the show ends.
Oh.
And I think it's really funny because I think that's what we need, like people highlighting the stupidity of trying to go to another planet. It's like the ultimate planned obsolescence, right? Oh, this planet is obsolete. Let's go get another one.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah,
Also, fun fact: according to Musk, we should be to now. We should have been in Mars. He
sure.
promised he would have a settlement in Mars by 2024, 10 years ago.
Wow.
Now he's saying in 2050. It's a scam. But anyhow. But yeah, so Solarpunk opens up a lot of discussion. I think that's the worth of Solarpunk. That it opens up a lot of discussion, and that there's artists who are engaging with it. Maybe not, sometimes not in the most conscious of ways, but they're still opening conversations. And as long as they're being seen, which is that's the other problem. Like a lot of work in museum and art just gets shown to the Illuminati of art.
Mhm.
Like Connecticut College, like my exhibition, like it was for very specific people who knew about the conference, who paid to go to Connecticut to see it, right? Like, I'm proud of that exhibition. I love that exhibition. It's one of the most fun I ever had. At the same time, I'm not naive enough to think that a lot of people saw it outside of academia. Like, I don't think school
Yeah, yeah,
children saw it. I don't think, um, you know what I mean, right?
yeah, absolutely.
So we need to give it more of a voice somehow. So it
Yes,
actually
definitely.
reaches the people that matter, not just to ourselves who already know this.
Yeah, otherwise we just live in a little academic bubble.
Exactly.
But that's where the worth of art comes from, right? And how it can reach multiple people and start thinking about the possible alternative futures, but starting with our own Earth and thinking about how we can just reacquaint ourselves with nature and ecology. And we can begin from there, I think.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good thought to end this episode.
I thought so too.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank you because I know at the beginning you were like super concerned that you had nothing to contribute, and you did a lot. Uh, which is always like I think you underestimate how smart you are. Anyhow, I want to thank everyone for listening to us. New Media Caucus has decided to give us new equipment, so you'll probably see us in HD and with better lighting and better audio. Um,
Yes.
we even got the microphone circle thingy, so you don't speak it didn't sound like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so we got like all the things. We just need like two more things, and we'll be like a
We'll be
professional
set. We'll be
recording
professional
studio.
podcasters.
We're
Yes.
we're right now we're at the border between two people in their bedrooms and now becoming like we have a little studio.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
eventually the world. No, but yeah. So I want to thank the board for like thinking that our little effort has been worth it, and it's also really encouraging that it happened on our 2 year anniversary. It was like a little
Yes.
gift. Yeah, it
Yay.
was really cool.
Excellent.
I was really happy about that. And for the people that listen, like I've noticed that there's more people listening to us now that I put it on the New Media Caucus Discord. You should join that. There's
Perfect.
actual academic discussions happening now.
Yeah.
We've had the reconstruction of a work called Netarium, which is completely dead, but I'm trying to revive it. And they found things that I hadn't found, so that was really good for my research. So if you're a researcher, if you're an academic, if you're a student, I really
You're an
recommend that you
artist.
join it. An
Yeah.
artist, and you will at least learn something, or you can contribute yourself. Like don't just be a presence there. Contribute, participate. It's worth it. Everybody's super nice.
It's part of being a community, right?
Exactly, it's building a community. Exactly, and hopefully a more serious community rather than just something that just happens, right?
Awesome.
Also, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We have a quick announcement. We have a talk at CAA next year in February. I think it's the 13th, correct?
February around the 13th. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna have a roundtable. The participants are being worked on, but I'm hoping we're gonna have some really interesting people to participate. So if you're at CAA or you're interested in like catching up with either one of us, we'll be there. There's also like an event from New Media Caucus that's still being planned, but my team at COSA is going to be showcasing this really crazy article that they made before I got here, which is a walkable article. Like it's an academic peer-reviewed article that's also a video game. So you can
Cool.
play the article, and then it's
Yeah.
also a pop-up book in some form.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's really awesome. So we're gonna showcase that, and probably we're actually gonna put it, if it's like we're working out the technology, but we'll probably have it playable on Header Footer as well.
Perfect.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
So we have all that coming up soon. There's also a new exhibition that's gonna pop up eventually. I just need to finish an article that Constance and I are writing and some stuff, and then we'll have a new exhibition because it's been a while. But it's good that the one that's right now on, it's the award show, so it gives them more platform, which is really cool. And that one's gonna be a crazy little exhibition that's more about who I am as a curator. You'll see so it's not exclusively art, it's also comic books and video games and movies, but it's also art. There's things that I don't want to spoil, but you'll get a better idea of how this happens as an academic. Anyhow, with nothing else you have anything else to add? Any announcements you want to make?
No.
All right then. So, sorry.
I think you said it all.
Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.